Welcome to my channel C.S. Lewis Spirit. In today's video, we're diving into something most people silently struggle with but never openly discuss, the hidden darkness inside others. This isn't about ghosts or horror stories. It's about something much more real, more dangerous. It's about the silent demons that live in people, the ones that don't show up with horns, but with fake smiles, the ones that feed off your peace, drain your energy, and twist your words, all without ever raising their voice. And yet, what if I told you could silence these demons without ever saying a word? It happened one rainy evening in a quiet town, where nothing ever seems to happen, until something does. A young man named Rayhan had just returned from the city. He was calm, observant, didn't talk much. People used to say he was too soft to survive in this cruel world. But they didn't know Rayhan had seen darkness. Not just the kind you run from, but the kind you carry, the kind that lives in people. He moved in with his uncle, an old bookstore owner who hardly spoke, but whose eyes had seen things. The bookstore was small, dusty, filled with old philosophy books, letters from dead poets, and journals that smelled like forgotten wisdom. There was a strange comfort in the silence of that place, until people started coming in, not for books, but with heavy, invisible baggage. They would smile at the door, but stare a little too long, laugh too loud, talk too much, and somehow they always left angry, confused, or disturbed. Rayhan noticed something was off. One evening, a man in a suit came into the store. Charming, polished, persuasive. He talked about growth, progress, and how the world needed leaders, not listeners. He wasn't there to buy books. He was there to be seen. Rayhan offered him tea, said nothing, just listened. 5 minutes passed. 10. The man grew restless. 15 minutes in, he started criticizing the smell of old paper, then the lighting, then Rayhan himself, without reason. Rayhan still didn't speak. And that's when it happened. The man's voice cracked, eyes twitched, and he suddenly stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Rayhan just watched, still silent. The uncle, who had seen it all from the back room, simply said, "That's how you silence demons. You starve them." Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Some people walk into your life not looking for peace, but for fuel, for reaction, for chaos. And when you don't feed them, they burn from within. This story isn't just Rayhan's. It might be yours too. You may have people around you who smile to your face, but carry venom behind their silence. And you wonder, how do I protect my peace without confrontation? How do I deal with their negativity without becoming negative myself? In the next part of the story, you'll find out what Rayhan discovered deep inside his uncle's journal, an ancient Stoic strategy for spiritual warfare that requires no weapons, no words, only presence. But what he found wasn't just a method. It was a mirror, and what stared back at him wasn't the demon outside. It was the one within. Rayhan couldn't sleep that night. The man's sudden shift from polite to hostile kept playing his head like a broken reel. How could someone unravel like that just because of silence? It wasn't just discomfort. It was rage, the kind that didn't come from outside, but boiled from within. And Rayhan knew then, this wasn't just about one man. It was something deeper, something darker, a pattern he had seen before, but never understood. Back in the city, Rayhan had tried to be the fixer, the one who reasoned, explained, justified, apologized for things he didn't even do, just to keep the peace. But peace never came. The more he spoke, the more they twisted his words. Friends turned into strangers. Relationships became battlegrounds. People claimed to love him, but always seemed to need someone to blame. And he had always been the easiest target. But this bookstore was different. It was quiet. Still, every day, strangers would walk in, and Rayhan would watch closely. How they carried themselves, how their voices shifted when no one gave them the reaction they expected. Some tried to provoke him. Others tried to charm him. Some even confessed things they hadn't told their closest friends. All he did was listen, not with agreement, not with judgment, just presence. And then one afternoon, while dusting the highest shelf, Rayhan found it. A black leather-bound journal, nearly buried behind a row of forgotten philosophy books. It didn't have a title, just a small emblem on the cover, a circle with a single line cutting through the middle. Inside, the pages were filled with handwritten notes. Some were reflections, some were quotes, and others were warnings. One line stood out more than the rest. Not every battle needs a voice. Some demons scream loudest when they're ignored. Rayhan's fingers froze over the page. It wasn't just the words, It was a handwriting. It was his uncle's. Calm, steady, wise. Like the man had lived a life far heavier than he ever spoke about. That night, Rayhan waited until the store closed. He sat under the dim yellow light, flipping through the journal page by page. Each entry seemed to pull him deeper into something he didn't yet understand. The entries weren't just about people. They were about energies, shadows that moved through crowds, smiles that felt like traps, emotions that weren't yours, but still stuck to your skin like oil. What if silence wasn't weakness, but a weapon? What if presence could strip away the mask people wear? But just as Rayhan was about to turn another page, he heard the front door creak open, and no one had touched the lock. Rayhan slowly stood up, the journal still in his hands. The air inside the bookstore shifted. It wasn't just a door creaking. It was the silence that followed. Heavy, watching. He stepped out from behind the counter, his eyes scanning the dimly lit room. No footsteps, no wind, just that lingering feeling like someone had entered not with feet, but with presence. He reached for the lights near the door and flicked them on. Nothing, no one. Yet the bell above the door had clearly chimed. The journal was still open in his hand, the ink from the last page smudging slightly beneath his thumb. He wasn't imagining this. Something was shifting, and it had begun the moment he opened that book. The next morning, his uncle acted normal, as if nothing had happened. Made tea, read the paper, gave Rayhan a faint nod, like he somehow knew but wouldn't speak. Rayhan wanted to ask about the journal, about the symbol, about the entry that felt like a riddle and a warning, but he didn't. Instead, he watched. The way his uncle would go silent whenever certain customers walked in, how his posture changed slightly, eyes more alert, breath slower. These weren't just customers, they were tests. And then there was her. A woman had started visiting the shop regularly, late 20s, always dressed in gray. She never bought anything, just wandered, fingers trailing across book spines, eyes flicking to Rayhan every few minutes. She smiled too easily, like she was trying to disarm something before it ever got noticed. Rayhan didn't smile back. He just watched. And when she left, the air always felt drained, like she took something with her. But what? Rayhan began wondering if demons weren't just inside people, but moving through them. And maybe some came not to hurt, but to test what was already broken. The woman in gray returned every evening now. Same time, same aisle, same look in her eyes. She never spoke first. And when Rayhan tried to greet her, she would only tilt her head slightly, like she was studying him, waiting. Something about her presence made the temperature in the room feel colder. Even the pages of the book she touched stayed open longer, as if refusing to close. One night, after she left, Rayhan noticed the journal had been moved. It was no longer where he had hidden it. A single new line had been added at the bottom of the last page. Some demons don't knock, they already have the key. Rayhan's heart pounded. He hadn't shown the journal to anyone, not even his uncle, who had written it. How did they know? He rushed to confront his uncle in the back room, but the door was already open, empty. The lights flickered once, then went out completely. Only the soft sound of the front door creaking echoed through the bookstore again. But this time, footsteps followed. He didn't need to turn around and know who it was. "I read your silence," the woman said, her voice low, almost melodic. "But silence doesn't protect you if your mind is still loud." Rayhan didn't answer. He stood still, just like he had read. Stillness stars the energy of chaos. But his thoughts were anything but calm. She stepped closer. "You think you're untouchable just because you don't speak?" she whispered. "But what if silence is exactly what lets us in?" Rayhan clutched the journal tighter, but his grip was slipping. Not from fear, but from something heavier. Doubt. Every lesson he had learned was now being tested. And she was no longer just a woman in gray. She was a storm wearing skin. Rayhan stood frozen, the journal slipping slightly in his hand, its weight growing heavier by the second. The woman's words echoed in his mind like a warning disguised as truth. What if silence is exactly what lets us in? Her tone wasn't mocking. It was certain, as if she wasn't guessing, but remembering. Rayhan slowly looked up to meet her eyes, and for the first time, he noticed something strange. Her pupils weren't reacting to the light. Her expression was calm, too calm, like someone who'd already read the last page of a book and knew exactly where the story was headed. But before Rayhan could respond, the bookstore lights flickered again. Once, twice, then a complete blackout. Silence. Then a faint rustle. Not from the woman. From the back room. Rayhan's instincts flared. He backed away slowly, not turning his back to her. But when he reached the edge of the counter and turned to run toward the back, he stopped cold. His uncle was standing there, but not as Rayhan had last seen him. He looked drained, pale, eyes sunken, almost hollow, and worse, his lips were moving, but no sound came out. His mouth opened wider, words clearly forming, but there was only silence. Pure, suffocating silence. Rayhan tried to speak his name, but no voice left his own throat either. The silence was no longer a choice. It had become a force. He turned back toward the woman. She was gone. The door hadn't opened. No sound of footsteps. Just gone. The journal in Rayhan's hand began to heat slightly. Not burn, but hum, vibrating with a strange energy, like it had absorbed everything and was now ready to reveal something darker. He opened it again, this time to the middle, and a folded page slipped out. On it, in his uncle's handwriting, "When the silence turns against you, speak only what cannot be twisted." The stakes had changed. Silence had once been a shield, but now it felt like a trap. Rayhan was no longer just trying to understand how to silence demons and people. He was beginning to wonder if the real battle was not about stopping them, but surviving them without losing the last pieces of his own soul. And the journal, it was no longer just a guide. It was a map, but where it was leading him, he wasn't sure he was ready to follow. Rayhan stared at the note, heart racing. Speak only what cannot be twisted. The words looped in his mind as he looked up at his uncle, still silently mouthing words that made no sound. Rayhan finally understood. The silence around them wasn't natural anymore. It had turned into something else, something hungry. It was feeding on confusion, on fear, on the things left unsaid. The woman in gray wasn't just a test. She was a trigger, a force sent to draw the darkness out from within. Rayhan stepped forward, lifted the journal, and for the first time spoke clearly into the stillness. "I know what you are," he said, not to his uncle, but to the presence still lingering in the air. "You feed on reaction, on chaos, on the noise we create trying to be understood." The lights flickered again, violently this time. The silence cracked slightly like the surface of ice. Rayhan continued, voice steady. "But you can't twist what isn't said to win an argument. You can't poison stillness that comes from clarity." Suddenly, his uncle gasped, as if pulled from deep underwater. His eyes blinked rapidly. "You found the journal," he whispered, voice hoarse but back. Rayhan nodded. "And I found her," he replied. His uncle's face went pale. "She isn't new, Rayhan. She's been here before. Every generation has someone who sees her. She comes to the one who listens, not to destroy him, but to awaken what's sleeping inside." Before Rayhan could respond, the journal fell from his hands and slammed shut on its own. A soft breath of wind passed through the room, and she was standing there again at the doorway. No sound, no warning, just a single tear slipping down her cheek. But this time, she looked different, not threatening, almost human. "You've seen it now," she said. "The demon wasn't me. It was your fear of being misunderstood." And with that, she turned and vanished into the night. Rayhan stood in silence, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, real. His uncle put a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't silence a demon, Rayhan," he said quietly. "You silenced the one inside you that always needed to explain." And just when Rayhan thought it was over, he opened the journal one last time and found a page he'd never seen before. It had his name on it, but he hadn't written it.